Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
Is anyone out there?
Another salesperson enduring the endless search. Exhausting. If you want to get right to the right conversations, you need LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Whether you're looking for new leads or strengthening existing relationships at your top accounts, get right to the right conversations with LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Try LinkedIn Sales Navigator now with a free 60-day trial at linkedin.com/trial. That's linkedin.com/trial.
Terms and conditions apply!
No informal chat anymore. No such thing as informal chat on this podcast now. It's all formal chat.
Right, are we
it's all discourse. Begin the discourse.
Hello and welcome to Backlisted, the podcast which gives new life to old books. Today, you find us in downtown San Francisco on a foggy evening in 1929. In an alley off Bush Street, a single shot rings out. There's a crash as something or someone smashes through the fence that runs alongside the alley and tumbles to the bottom of the slope. A car pulls away, its headlights angling across the street. Then silence returns. I'm John Mitchinson, the publisher of Unbound, the publisher of Unbound, where people crowdfund the books they really want to read.
And I'm Andy Miller, the author of The Year of Reading Dangerously. And today on Backlisted, we are joined by a new guest, Mark Billingham, making his Backlisted debut. Welcome, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Mark Billingham is one of the UK's most acclaimed and popular crime writers. His series of novels featuring D.I. Tom Thorne has twice won him the Crime Novel of the Year award. Every single one of his 23 novels has been a Sunday Times top 10 bestseller, and his debut novel, Sleepyhead, was chosen by the Sunday Times as one of the 100 books that had shaped the decade. In 2021, he received the award for outstanding contribution to crime fiction at the Harrogate Crime Writing Festival. And his latest novel is The Last Dance, the first in a new series featuring Detective Sergeant Declan Miller, published by Sphere. A Sky television series based on the Thorne novels starred David Morrissey as Tom Thorne, and a series based on In the Dark and Time of Death was broadcast on the BBC in 2017. Mark lives in London with his wife and 2 children when he's not living out rockstar fantasies as a member of the fun-loving crime writers, about whom we shall talk in a moment. He is hard at work writing his next novel. Mark, I saw you and your fellow fun-loving crime writers back in January giving an unplugged performance and chatting in an informal setting.
Yes.
Is it quite difficult to make your diaries fit with one another if you need to get to, because you were pretty good. And, you know, you were saying on stage, well, we don't get together to rehearse very often.
Getting together is hard because not only have we all got, you know, busy diaries, but we all live in different cities. You know, we've got people coming from Scotland and Northern Ireland and the south of England and the north of England. And so trying to get us in the same place, you know, at the same time is tricky. And sometimes we'll rehearse at sound checks, you know, quite often. We have to do that,
So I think when Val McDermott was with us, she was saying that she really enjoys it because it seems like it's like a bonus. It's not what she got into crime writing for, and yet here it is.
Oh, it's exactly what I got into crime writing for. I knew this day would come. No, I feel exactly the same as Val. I mean, as the 2 oldest members of the band, we, you know, the pair of us both look at each other sometimes and go, "How did this happen?" You know, what started out as just a bit of fun, you know, that we could do at, you know, late night at some festivals has become a bit full on in a good way.
It is a fixed lineup, or is it like a style council style arrangement with you and Val?
No. It is a fixed lineup now. No, it is like definitely now. Yeah. Because of the difficulty of getting us all together. early on, we did the odd gig where, one of us wasn't there. Notably when we were playing in Iceland, and Val called us when we were at the airport to say, I'm not going to make it. I'm feeling terrible. So we went and we played this show in Iceland, and we figured out, we rejigged the set. And who was
show McDermott.
No show McDermott. Yeah. And to be honest, we just decided we'd never do it again. We'd never do that again. And so we've always had that thing of it's all six of us or it's none of us.
And Mark, how do you fit your writing commitments in around your touring schedule? You write prolifically, right? And it seems to me, judging from what you were saying and your fellow panelists were saying, that it's important. Readers want a series. They often want a series. So when you commit to a new book, you're probably committing to 3 or 4 new books if you get it away and it's working.
Yeah.
How do you balance out this whole thing of promoting the work with creating the work?
Well, I suppose I just have a fairly good inbuilt sense of a calendar, in that I know that is writing time and that is showing off time. Because I can't mix the two things. I absolutely can't mix the two things. I cannot write in a hotel or on a train. But that said, and I'm sure other writers have said this to you, you're writing the book in your head all the time. It never goes anywhere. So that thing is in your head pretty much for the whole year you're writing the book, and you're working stuff out and trying to solve problems. But I can put that to the back of my head and go, this is time to get up on stage and gob off about the previous book, or play with the band, or whatever it might be. And if I'm honest, that's the bit I enjoy the most. I mean, I know that a lot of writers... Yeah, God. I mean, I know a
gobbing
lot of writers...
off, I love it.
The gobbing off. I know a lot of writers would rather stick needles in their eyes, than stand up on stage.
It's true.
And talk about stuff. And that's the way it used to be. But over the past 20, 25 years, I suppose, increasingly writers have been under pressure to get out there and sell themselves as much as they... the publishers are trying to sell their books. And that's the bit I love. I'm just a big show-off, and I come from a sort of performance background. So that's the bit I'm like, that's the perk. The job is sitting in this chair and writing the book. And the perk is somebody saying, do you want to come to this festival and talk about it?
When was your first novel published?
2001.
Okay, so you've been doing this for over 20 years.
Yeah.
Crime seems to me to be one of the success stories of the last 20 years. I mean, we were talking earlier that in 1990, when I was at Waterstones, we ran a British crime festival. And I remember the novelty of the party, these crime writers all getting together saying, oh, this is great. We should, it didn't happen as much then. And now it feels to me like it's, publishers know what they're doing with crime lists. There's obviously, as you say, there's the structure of festivals. There's Harrogate. There's the daggers, which always were a slightly strange, they weren't kind of centre stage literary awards, the Crime Writer Association daggers, and now they're kind of big. It's a really big glitzy occasion. I was there last year. It was fantastic. And I guess also, you look at television. Maybe television has always been full of crime and procedurals, but there seems to be a lot more of it now than there's ever been.
Yes, and I think you are more likely these days to get an invitation to Hay or Cheltenham or Oxford or one of the more prestigious literary festivals than you would have been 25 years ago.
Yeah, it's not. There's not that divide. There's literary generic divide.
Not so much. I mean, you still come across it. You still come across it at some places where you walk into the. Mind you, there was a time when if you walked into the green room at Hay and you were a writer, you were in the minority. Because the place was full of politicians and TV chefs, and you'd be looking around going, "Isn't this a book festival?" But no, I mean, crime has just grown enormously in the 20 odd years I've been doing it. But also, of course, we've had just the growth of social media, which means, when you've got an event, it's very easy to say, "I'm here tomorrow. I'm going to be there next week. Come out and see me at this event," or whatever, all that stuff. But it's still hit and miss. It's still very hit and miss. But a strange thing I've noticed, if you turn up and there's an audience of 200 people and you have a storming event, you'll probably sell less books than you would if you turned up to 40 people.
Because the queue's commensurately longer.
Yeah.
People have got places to go.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that the Hay Festival is very good at. They have that very good bookshop, and people seem to be prepared to queue for hours. It's bizarre. Yeah. But hey, I mean, bizarre but good.
Yes.
You do such wild and unpredictable things.
Don't be silly. You're taking the fall.
You've been playing with me. Just pretending you cared to attack me like this. You didn't care at all. You don't love me.
I won't play the sap for you.
Oh, you know it's not like that. You can't say that.
You never played square with me for half an hour at a stretch since I've known you.
You know down deep in your heart that in spite of anything I've done, I love you.
I don't care who loves who. I won't play the sap for you. I won't walk in Thursby's, and I don't know how many other footsteps. You killed Miles, and you're going over for it.
Guess what we're going to talk about? The book we're here to discuss today is, in fact, a crime novel. The Maltese Falcon by, and listen closely, Dashiell Hammett. First serialised in Black Mask magazine in 1929 and then in book form by Alfred A. Knopf the following year. It's widely considered to be the novel that inaugurated the hard-boiled genre of detective fiction. It introduces the tough, abrasive, but relentlessly just private detective Sam Spade, who sent Dorothy Parker mooning about in a daze of love such as I had not known for any character in literature since I encountered Sir Lancelot. The labyrinthine plot turns around the eponymous falcon of the title, a statuette so valuable that 3 people are killed in the search to retrieve it. But the plot, tight as a tripwire though it may be, is not what has made this book a classic. It's the snap of Hammett's dialogue, the dread-laden atmosphere in which all the characters plot and double-cross each other at will, and the haze of cigarette smoke and hard liquor that surround them that lingers in the memory. Hammett's San Francisco, filled with sharp-tongued dames, wisecracking gumshoes, cops on the take, and thugs on the lam, spawned a whole genre of noir novels and movies, including John Huston's classic adaptation starring Humphrey, Bogart, and Mary Astor in 1941. In 1995, the Mystery Writers of America voted The Maltese Falcon the 3rd greatest crime novel of all time. In the next hour, we'll attempt to establish why.
To keep you listening, the exciting promise of a quiz later on, which will establish the surprising links between Dashiell Hammett and Elvis Costello. So we will come on to that before we finish. But first, we'll start where we always start on Backlisted. Mark, where or when or why did you first encounter the Maltese Falcon or the work of Dashiell Hammett?
Well, I'd seen the movie, the Bogart movie, and I started going out and buying hard-boiled crime fiction. Picador they did 3 volumes of Chandler, and they did what they called the 4 great novels of Dashiell Hammett, in addition, which I still have. Well, I read all of them, and they're all terrific. And I went out and then got his Continental Op stories. But the Maltese Falcon is the book I've just been, passionate about ever since. I've read it. I've probably read it a dozen times. If I'm ever asked to pick a book for any occasion, it will be the Maltese Falcon, because as John was hinting at there at the beginning, everybody accepts that it's an important novel, in terms of its place in the genre and the fact that it kickstarted the hardboiled movement. But my argument, and the hill I will die on, is that it's also a great novel, not just an important one.
I have to say that I had never read The Maltese Falcon, though, like you were saying, I'd seen the Huston film. I'd never read the novel before we were preparing for this episode. Mitch, had you read it before?
I certainly had.
You'd read it before? Okay.
Yeah. But
the first thing to say is I could not believe this novel is nearly 100 years old.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Amazing, isn't it?
As simple and straightforward as that. So culturally omnipotent is the voice minted by Hammett in that one novel nearly 100 years ago. It seems impossible that you're reading something that hadn't been written before, and yet you're constantly being reminded that before this guy, no one wrote like that.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah, it is extraordinary. And didn't Chandler say something? Because it was so influential. Anybody who answers "yeah" in a book was instantly accused of ripping off Hammett. I mean, we'll come on to the dialogue later. I read it, Andy, when I came down from university. I'd had enough of very large novels written by people in periwigs, and I just started to read those Picador collections, and I worked my way through Hammett, the Hammett collection, the Chandler collection, the James M. Cain collection. Went on to Jim Thompson and a lot more in that sort of Black Mask kind of
Ross MacDonald, some brilliant writers. And for listeners won't appreciate this, but here is that very volume. Still has my name in the front, as I used to do back in those days.
As you said, Mark, the 4 great novels, but not the whichever one they left out.
Well, the one they left out, of course, is the one he's in many ways best known for, which is The Thin Man.
Thin Man, okay.
Which was made into loads of movies and stuff.
Which made him a lot of money, which we'll talk about what he did with that money. But the key, I think, for me, rereading it is I have to say, I remember enjoying it hugely at the time. I think maybe when you're younger, you're a bit more impressed by Chandler because you think Chandler's got the flouncer, she was as cute as lace pants, a black hole opened at my feet and I fell in. But this is a really great novel. I was blown away by rereading it, and it's put me in a great mood all week. It's right up there, I would say, with Gatsby, with Étranger by Camus. I think it's a great modern existential classic.
Yeah, I mean, I know that, obviously there are always comparisons made with Chandler, and Chandler is often thought of as being actually the better prose stylist. I would argue with that, and I'm sure we'll come on to talking about the prose. But I think in many ways, actually, Hammett has worn better. And certainly in the case of this novel, I think one of the reasons that Hammett has worn better is that it's the only novel to feature Sam Spade. And I think, he, right. Again, whether that's an argument that people can have, without ever knowing the answer to it, because maybe he would have written more about Spade if he hadn't been so, troubled with ill health and stuff.
Can I just dig into that a bit? Is that because you think if he had written Sam Spade repeatedly, perhaps like Marlowe and Chandler, a kind of self-conscious by rote element?
I 100% agree. I mean, it's very tempting to believe that Hammett already understood the sort of law of diminishing returns. That a series,
he'd written 37 Continental Ops stories, a couple of novels.
Yeah,
he cut his teeth writing for pound a word detective stories, Black Mask. I mean, it was. He kind of learned his craft, not, sitting kind of thinking of great thoughts in his bedroom. Although he had all those great thoughts, I think he did. He was quite ambitious. He wanted to. There's a great story. Someone would say he was the brightest of his siblings, troubled family, who's reading Immanuel Kant at the age of 13. So he kind of had a kind of, and maybe come on to this. I know we got stories about Gertrude Stein and things later, but he learned his craft writing popular stories for the popular detective magazines of the day.
Mark, let's say Hammett did not intend to found a genre. We'll come on to why not. But what are the hallmarks of the hard-boiled genre? What are we looking for when we read a hard-boiled crime novel?
Well, in terms of prose, you're looking for what I call muscular prose. You're looking for sort of clipped, short, snappy, hard-boiled sentences. There are the tropes. There's the femme fatale. There's the hard-boiled gumshoe. Yeah. There's the kind of characters John's already described. The villains on the run, the gangsters, the whatever. And I'm not saying he was the first person ever to write about characters like that. I don't know. I don't know much about what became before Hammett. What he never did, quite crucially, was take us inside Sam Spade's head, and that's one of the things that makes this novel so unique, I think.
When the Maltese Falcon was published and was a surprising success, I think including Hammett, everyone was surprised at its commercial success. He was compared stylistically to Hemingway quite a lot. And that similar, very sparse prose, one of the things that it's perceived that both Hemingway and Hammett were responding to was a kind of post-First World War nobility of conflict language, which had led indirectly to the death of so many millions of people. That it was basically the curlicues of style were perceived after the First World War as bullshit, and what you needed to do was get down to the heart of the matter.
Glory, courage, honour,
Hemingway,
all that kind of thing.
Hammett and Hemingway are much closer in spirit, or were perceived as much closer in spirit at the time than they would be now. But in fact, they're both coming from that kind of. There's that quote, isn't there, that Hammett was the better writer because whereas Hemingway's tough language hid weakness,
softness.
Hammett's softness. Hammett's language hid toughness.
Toughness, yeah.
Well, the other name I'm going to throw into the mix here, in terms of of possible influences, and it's just one I'd love to think was possible, is Noel Coward. Because although what was happening
very hilly San Francisco. Yeah.
well, what was happening in literary terms on this side of the Atlantic, when the Maltese Falcon was published, of course, was the early flowerings of what became known as Golden Age fiction here. The classic Between the Wars, Agatha Christie, Marjorie Allingham, blah, blah, blah. But what was happening on the stage, the same year Maltese Falcon came out, was the first production of Private Lives. And it's so tempting to think that, I'm not saying Hammett popped over here and went to see it, but maybe he'd read Coward, because there is something in those exchanges, those sort of tennis match exchanges between Spade and Gutman and Caspar Gutman, that really, they are that kind of fat-free, fizzing, kind of crackling dialogue that you associate with somebody like Noel Coward. Albeit very different subject. But
That's brilliant.
Who knows?
Mark, do you want to read us a bit?
Yeah.
And I wonder whether you could set the scene.
Well, it's a very easy scene to set because it's the opening of the book. And I deliberately didn't want to choose anything that has dialogue in, because then you become very self-conscious about the voice you're using, and you end up doing a terrible impression of Humphrey Bogart. And, So this is just the opening of the first chapter, which is called Spade and Archer. Samuel Spade's jaw was long and bony, his chin a jutting V under the more flexible V of his mouth. His nostrils curved back to make another, smaller V. His yellow-grey eyes were horizontal. The V motif was picked up again by thickish brows rising outward from twin creases above a hooked nose, and his pale brown hair grew down from high flat temples in a point on his forehead. He looked rather pleasantly like a blonde Satan. He said to Effie Perrine, "Yes, sweetheart?"
So
blonde
great.
Satan.
And then what happens is, what I love is it's the first time a kind of a beautiful, mysterious woman comes in with a roll of cash and has got a mystery that she needs solving.
And that is the trope. That's the trope of hard-boiled detective fiction, right?
I remember reading it thinking, oh my God, he did this before anybody else.
Yeah.
Before this. And you think of all the countless books that have started with that.
Yeah.
And there's a great, one of the many, I think, brilliant things in the book are the different ways he relates to the women in the book with his assistant Effie, it kind of bookends the whole book. He has a very physical relationship with her that probably wouldn't be allowed today.
Well,
in strict HR terms.
Yeah, Effie, I think, is the only, and this is one of the things I love about the book. Effie is probably the only decent person in the entire book.
Yes, okay.
And that's for a very good reason. That's for a little trick that Hammett plays, in that the first time we meet the femme fatale, who starts off being Miss Wonderly and eventually becomes Bridget, Spade asks Effie what she thinks of her, and Effie says, "I'm with her."
I'm with her,
and that's the dummy that the reader buys.
Yeah.
Because you think, well, if Effie thinks she's great, then we'll go with that. But it's one of the things I love about the book, because there's so much these days. You see it in television, you see it in books all the time, where publishers say, "Who are we rooting for? Who's the
relatable
person?
character?"
Yeah, none of them. They're all horrible, including Spade, probably, which is the mystery of the novel.
Well, I was going to ask you: Is
he a good guy?
See, for me is what makes this the archetypal mystery novel, because crime fiction in America is called mystery fiction. And most of the time, that's a terrible description, because most of the time, the books that are called mystery novels are not mysteries at all. Not really. If the only thing that's going on is who your killer is, the whodunit, then it's probably a terrible book. So, but this is genuinely a mystery novel. And the mystery at the heart of it it's nothing to do with the bloody Falcon. The Falcon is the biggest MacGuffin in the history. Exactly. The biggest MacGuffin ever.
Of MacGuffins.
Right, absolutely. I suppose the mystery at the heart of it is what is Spade's game? And the reader is encouraged, and this is where the book is very different to the film. The reader is encouraged actually to think that Spade is morally corrupt. Completely morally corrupt. I mean, he finds out his partner's been shot. The first thing he does is light a fag. The second thing he does is wipe his partner's name off the door.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, he's sleeping with his partner's wife. Yeah. So you kind of think...
Treats her really badly.
Treats her really badly. Yeah. He's a fairly terrible person. But so, is he doing it, as he later claims, simply because his partner's been killed and he's a man supposed to do something about that? If the Falcon had turned out to be something other than it does turn out to be, Would he have waltzed off with it? You never really get to find out, and that's what I love about it.
I suppose also what would be lost to some extent to a reader, to us as readers nearly a century later, precisely because of the innovations made by Hammett, is that idea of the anti-hero is sort of minted here, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been, the thing you're talking about, Mark, would have been much more shocking to a contemporary reader that their supposed hero is at best amoral and possibly immoral, or at least he's immoral to a reader in the late 1920s or early 1930s.
I think you're absolutely right, Andy. I think it was kind of revolutionary. And even 10 years later, more than 10 years later, when John Huston is making the film, he can't do that. He has to. You have to be rooting for Humphrey Bogart right from the word go. Even though Humphrey Bogart is nowhere near the Sam Spade of the books. One of the things I've always loved is the fact that when Huston made the film, Huston didn't want Bogart. Huston wanted George Raft, and George Raft, of course, who had played lots of killers and extremely amoral characters. He's much closer to the Spade in the books than Bogart.
The blonde Satan. I mean, it's there, right? It's a kind of Nietzschean kind of quality.
Now, on this podcast, we like to appraise the blurbs that publishers apply to the books we're talking about. And I've got a treat for you here. I'm going to read you 2 parts of the jacket flap from the original first edition of the Maltese Falcon.
Go for it.
And you tell me, guys, whether you think this is doing a good selling job. Right? Mark, do you write your own blurbs, or do people write them for you, or do you collaborate? Or
I collaborate. I mean, it's always struck me as very strange that a writer would want to spend a year writing a book and then not have some say about what it says on the back of it.
You'd be surprised, Mark.
I know, or even what the picture on the front of it is. Yes, no, I absolutely do collaborate. My editor will do a first draft of a blurb, and then we'll bat it backwards and forwards
punch it up
until
a bit.
we're both happy.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm gonna put my reputation on the line and say I don't think Dashiell Hammett had anything to do with this blurb. But anyway, well, let's see, shall we?
I know who his editor was.
Who's his editor?
His editor was Blanche Knopf. It was Alfred's wife.
I reckon Blanche may have been involved here. Let's see what we think.
A knockabout romantic comedy that the whole family will enjoy.
The man who understands women.
Maltese Falcon by Dashiell Hammett. Sam Spade is a knockout detective, and yet, personally, he cares not a hoot for the law. So little, so that constantly he is just on the verge of being pulled by the Frisco cops. When Spade goes out after anything, neither lead, slugs, women, nor the old Nick himself can stop him from landing it. Here he sets himself to outwit 3 contending factions who all want the same thing, which he also wants, and it is only natural, therefore, that many murders strew his winding wake, that several persons suddenly fall doped, and a great liner burns mysteriously to the water's edge. That's it.
Terrible, isn't it?
It's really terrible, isn't it? Wow. Now, normally when we do this feature, Mark, we end up saying, oh, that was surprisingly good.
Yeah.
Not in that case. Do you want a bit more?
Yeah, go on. I can't imagine where it's going to go.
We turn our attentions now to the back flap. Because they've done the hard sell on that flap, right? Here's the back flap. Dashiell Hammett. Dashiell Hammett writes a superior mystery novel because for many years he was a Pinkerton detective.
Yeah, he was.
He is probably the only quote-unquote bull who has ever turned his experience into the writing of crime stories. To Hammett, plot is not the main thing in the story. It is the behavior of the detective attacking a problem which intrigues him. The op, as Hammett sees him, is, quote, a little man going forward day after day through mud and blood and death and deceit, as callous and brutal and cynical as is necessary, towards a dim goal with nothing to push or pull him towards it, except that he's been hired to reach it.
Okay.
You see, she hands it over to Dashiell, if indeed it was Blanche Knopf, but everything feels okay, doesn't it?
That's a bit better, yeah.
His experience, the Pinkerton detective thing is really interesting because, it's an amazing cast of characters who we haven't really mentioned yet, but the cast of characters, supporting characters, is just
we should do
peerless. It's peerless. And they were all based on characters he'd come across as a detective. So Bridget O'Shaughnessy was a former client. Wilmer, the midget, was a gunman in the book who was based on a villain called the Midget Bandit, who he dealt with. Joel Cairo was a forger. And the interesting one, Caspar Gutman, there are 2 theories about this, the fat man. One, that he was a German agent that Hammett had come across. The other one, that he was based on Fatty Arbuckle, because Hammett worked on the Fatty Arbuckle rape case, the very famous Fatty Arbuckle rape case.
Amazing.
So some people think he's supposed to be Fatty Arbuckle or based on Fatty Arbuckle.
I just want to, as a prompt for people who haven't read the book but have seen the film, which might be quite a few people, Sam Spade, played by Humphrey Bogart, as discussed, and Bridget O'Shaughnessy, played by Mary Astor. But Joel Cairo is unforgettably played by Peter Lorre. Caspar Gutman is unforgettably played by Sidney Greenstreet. And Wilma Cook by Elisha Cook Jr. I mean, it's
It's amazing, an amazing cast.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
One of the great film noirs, obviously.
Do you know what John Huston's cameo is in his own film?
I do not.
No.
He plays the sea captain who staggers over the threshold
Jacoby,
and dies.
Captain Jacoby.
Captain Jacoby, brilliant.
Which is the only, bear in mind, it's the only death that's actually on the page, as it were. It's the only death we witness.
Yes,
in
that's
the
right.
book.
That's true.
Right.
Of 3.
Nikki, could we hear a little clip from The Maltese Falcon by John Huston, please?
Mr. Spade, I have a terrible, terrible confession to make. That story I told you yesterday was just a story.
Oh, that. Well, we didn't exactly believe your story, Miss... what is your name, Wonderly or LeBlanc?
It's really O'Shaughnessy, Bridget O'Shaughnessy.
We didn't exactly believe your story, Miss O'Shaughnessy. We believed you $200.
You mean that...
I mean, you paid us more than if you'd been telling us the truth, and enough more to make it all right.
Tell me, Mr. Spade, am I to blame for last night?
Oh, you warned us that Thursby was dangerous. Of course, you lied to us about your sister and all that, but that didn't count. We didn't believe you. No, I wouldn't say that you were at fault.
Thank you. Mr. Archer was so alive yesterday. So solid and hearty.
Stop it. You know what he was doing? Those are the chances we take.
Was he married?
Yeah, with 10,000 insurance, no children, and a wife that didn't like him.
It's quite clear from that clip that he didn't give a hoot.
He did not. The guy who doesn't give a hoot. Yeah. Seems like that might be an appropriate moment for us to break in the chat just for a message from our sponsors.
The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Hey, it's Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast. The NBA playoffs are here, and Michelob Ultra is getting you closer to the game than ever with courtside seats and more. Enter now at MichelobUltra.com/courtside. Michelob Ultra Superior Access Courtside 2024 to 2025 sweepstakes. No purchase necessary. Open to U.S. residents 21 or older. Ends on July 1st, 2025. Multiple entry periods. Visit MichelobUltra.com/superior access/courtside for free entry deadlines, and official rules. Message and data rates may apply. Void where prohibited.
The film is different, right, Mark? But it doesn't do any damage to the book, does it?
No, I don't think it does. I mean, especially with that cast that we've already mentioned. I mean, with the possible exception of Bogart, actually, it's perfectly cast. I mean,
Do you think, though? Seriously, though? You think Bogart is not warming it up a bit for the screen?
He is, and some of the decisions were Huston's in that, and it's been filmed certainly on more than one. There were 2 films before Huston's film, but all the film adaptations did the same thing, which the book doesn't. They all chose to show the moment when Spade realizes, and obviously this is massive spoiler alert here, when Spade realizes who killed his partner, let's say, which he's never shown in the book. Again, that is a moment that is left to the reader to try and figure out. And Bogart, the problem, I suppose, is that Bogart also played Marlowe. That's sort of one of the issues. He's known to play the 2 iconic, noir, hard-boiled detectives, and there's not a lot to choose in between the 2 in their film incarnations. They're kind of interchangeable. No, I'm not saying that film did anything to spoil the book, really, but the book is a much different experience. if all you know is the film, when you read the book, you'll be quite surprised, I think.
Okay, so I want to ask you both then. The book's justified reputation as the birthplace of the hard-boiled crime fiction, has that imprisoned the Maltese Falcon critically in a way that when I was talking about the comparison with Hemingway, which people were very happy to make at the time, they would not make now because of the divide between genre and quote-unquote literature. Do you think the Maltese Falcon has been slightly imprisoned by genre so that people can't see its literary attributes?
To a degree, that's certainly true. As I said way back at the beginning, I've always tried to maintain it's a great novel and not just an important one. But I think what you're saying is true of almost any beautifully written genre novel. If you started talking to people about serial killer thrillers, let's say, you'd have to make an extremely good argument for the fact that Silence of the Lambs by Thomas Harris or Red Dragon by Thomas Harris is a wonderful, wonderful novel. That then spawned a whole host of inferior imitators. There's no question about that. But is still a great piece of literature. And I will, fight anybody who says any different. And the same is certainly true of, writers of a certain age. And it's happened to Chandler. Chandler has certainly been, Chandler is now certainly seen as being in the literary firmament in the same way that Patricia Highsmith is, and probably James M. Cain or Cornell Woolrich or some of those people who are writing. But it's almost like you've got to be dead nearly 100 years before a genre writer can get the props they deserve from the literary community.
John, do you think there's something, my pet theory on this is that the very thing that Hammett withholds, psychological insight, is the bedrock of so much 20th century literary writing.
Okay.
So its omission seems like not a deliberate choice, but a failure in some ways, if read in a particular way. Though it seemed to me, reading it afresh, that wasn't the case at all.
So, I got two things to say about that. One is going back to the list of the greatest crime novels of all time, or the greatest list that the mystery writers of America in 1995 put together. Really interesting. Their first was Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle, the complete Sherlock Holmes. Second was Edgar Allan Poe, Tales of Mystery and Imagination. And then third was The Maltese Falcon. So they're already quite literary things to have at the top of the list, I think. You could argue that Holmes is, but Poe is definitely seen to be a kind of a literary writer. And I think you're right, Andy. But the Maltese Falcon happens at a really interesting juncture, I think, in what's going on in 20th century literature. The French don't have such a problem with this. They don't have a problem with seeing great art as genre. But Hammett writes to his editor, Blanche Knopf, and says, I want to write a stream of consciousness novel. He was a huge admirer of Gertrude Stein and apparently also Henry James. And then suddenly he got a contract to do some stuff for Hollywood, to do some writing for Hollywood. So he says, I've had a bit of a change in plan with my stream of consciousness novel. He said, I want it to be, I'm only going to write in objective and filmable form. So it was what the critic I was reading said, it's perhaps that The Maltese Falcon is the first book that was ever conceived as a film before it was written. That he already had this idea that it was about scenes and exteriors. I think you're right to say that the lack of psychology in it has maybe sometimes made it more difficult. You've got to also see that it's surrounded by a lot of stuff that isn't anywhere near as good as The Maltese Falcon. But I would say, I genuinely think that it does bear comparison as a work of 20th century American art. One of the things that doesn't happen in the book, in the film, is when Spade goes back to the office at the end, he's quite depressed to realize that in the end he's trapped, Mary Astor, Bridget O'Shaughnessy may be going to jail, but he's trapped in his life as a detective. And I think some knowledge of what happens next in Hammett's life only makes you see what an extraordinary one-off achievement the Maltese Falcon is.
Bridget O'Shaughnessy, of course, won't just be going to jail; she'll be going to her death. And
yes,
and Spade has sent her to her death.
Yeah.
She pleads, she begs and pleads for him to let her go, and then he reels off a list of 7. He reels off a list of 7 reasons in this big long speech why you can't possibly do that, and sends her off to be almost certainly to be executed. What I think that's fascinating, what you've just said about it possibly being a sort of novel, almost like a novelized screenplay, because of course the difference between a book and a film is that you cannot get inside a character's head in a movie unless you have a cheesy kind of voiceover. But I would argue that everything Hammett did in terms of what he left out psychologically, that that lack of psychological insight, was completely deliberate.
Yeah,
I agree.
He's talked about this later. He talked about this later on, and it was a technique which he called meiosis, which was something he learned in his advertising days. That's basically less is more. That if you hold back and you understate stuff, you actually increase the impression. You actually make a greater impression by understating stuff. Less is more, basically. And I think it was completely deliberate.
When it comes down to it, Hammett creates what is perceived as, very important phrase, what is perceived as a non-literary genre by bringing to it all his reading and ideas and the discipline of literature. It's all very well him saying to Blanche Knopf, well, as luck would have it, I've got a film deal, so obviously I'm going to, write. But fundamentally, what writer can actually do that? It's much more likely that he just simply pares back some of the things he was going to do anyway, which are coming from a place of having read Kant at the age of 13 and Henry James. I mean, the idea that of all the writers in the world who would influence such a pared back style, Henry James is the one. And yet you can kind of see it. You can kind of see it because of the psychological consistency of it. So, John, what does happen to Dashiell after he has this huge success?
Dashiell, of course, whose real name we should point out is Samuel, which I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's a coincidence. I'm not sure.
Where do you get your ideas from, Mr. Hammett? Yes.
We should say Dashiell is the reason we're calling him Dashiell is we will play a small clip of Lillian Hellman, his partner, later on. And she's interviewed by Dick Cavett in 1973, and she says it was Dashiell. She says it's an old Maryland name. So he was born and brought up in Maryland. His father was a feckless alcoholic. He loved his mother, but his mother suffered from TB. He also ended up suffering from TB. So his kind of early, he had to leave school at 14, or despite being bright, because he had to go and earn money. And as we've sort of picked up, he earned that through writing pulp fiction. He became a Pinkerton detective. There's also the theory that maybe a lot of his writing was because he had to write those very terse reports, that maybe that also contributed to his famously sort of terse exterior observed prose style. And then Andy has already alluded to the fact that he couldn't work as a detective because he was ill, but then he writes the Maltese Falcon, and it becomes a massive hit.
It's the worst, best thing that could have happened to him. Right? He because suddenly, be careful what you wish for. He's acclaimed, he's a bestseller, people are making films of his stuff. He has all the money he could possibly desire to spend on anything other than writing more books, it seems to me, right? There are no deadlines anymore, and gradually it peters out, right? The creativity seems to drain away from him.
It's a mixture, as I understand it, of exactly what you've just said, Andy, plus ill health, plus the fact that he was being crucified by the government, and had to fight against, I mean, did he actually go up? Did he go up before House on American
He did, and he went to prison as well.
He went to prison,
later in his life. But.
And like Sam Spade, I mean, it's a very easy comparison to make, but he refused to bow down. He just refused to crumble in the face of this terrible persecution. So, I mean, I think writing kind of went on the back burner for a while.
Yeah. He also, it's worth saying, I get the impression from what I've read that the writing was drying up when he meets Lillian Hellman.
Yeah.
And he devotes the energy that might have gone into his own creativity, he devotes to her in a very forward-thinking way. It's Hammett who provides Lillian Hellman with the idea that for her play, The Children's Hour, which becomes one of the most important American plays of the 20th century. And it's Hammett who edits that. There are notes of his edits. He's deeply involved with the creation of that play. That's not to take credit away from Lillian Hellman, but nevertheless, that is a collaborative project. And in turn, his interest in the Communist Party, he's kind of the writing is dried up. So he throws himself into being a figurehead for the various organizations, and then in turn becomes persecuted, Mark, as you say.
He does. I mean, it's interesting. When he meets, obviously, Hellman and he fall in love, have a famously tempestuous relationship. He is already drinking, but he drinks even more when they're together. But I mean, his last hurrah, really, and it was a fairly kind of successful hurrah. It lasted him at least 15 years in terms of money. He creates Nick and Nora Charles. Nick is an alcoholic, basically an alcoholic detective. The Thin Man, played brilliantly by William Holden in the movies, and Myrna Loy plays Nora. And that gets turned into what we would now call a franchise. I think there's 6 or 7 Thin Man movies, and it goes on right into the 1950s. And he is making money, good money, really good money, and he's hanging out through Lillian Hellman with the Fitzgeralds, and the kind of the set that he's always felt he ought to be part of. But as Andy says, it somehow in the middle of all that, his ability to write fiction disappears. And the Thin Man is not really, let's be honest, it's many things. It's romantic comedy, but it's not hardboiled. It's not Sam Spade.
No.
We talked about Lillian Hellman. Should we hear from Lillian Hellman now? We've got a clip from her on you said it was the Dick Cavett show, did you, in the 70s?
Yeah, and I should set this up, is that basically André Gide and Gertrude Stein and all the kind of the cool kids in Paris, for reasons that we can only speculate, pick out Hammett as being one of the great American novelists. And I think it was in 1935 they get to meet Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas in New York.
I remember she gave me a very unpleasant look. I was sitting with her and Hammett on a couch. She said to Hammett, "You write about women better than any other American writer." And Dash very pleasantly said, "Maybe because of Lillian." And she said, "Who?" Turned instead of
Well, that relationship was, as we know, a stormy and tempestuous one.
I think what you just said is very interesting, John, about once the writing dried up, it's hard not to speculate. Self-loathing would be putting it too strongly, but it's hard not to think that, like many writers who suddenly find themselves successful with what they do not consider their best work.
Yeah.
The Maltese Falcon was not his favorite novel. It really wasn't. And suddenly that's being filmed everywhere. It's a huge bestseller. And then the Thin Man stuff happens. And as you say, suddenly he's at the center of a franchise. And he kind of loses the spark. He kind of, that's not what I wanted to be successful for.
Not unlike Salinger in so far as
Right.
Salinger becomes phenomenally successful for a book that he considers a warm-up to more interesting things.
Yeah.
And Catcher in the Rye, for its author, it just becomes a colossal pain in the ass.
Yeah, an albatross, a massive
There's
albatross.
a lovely passage in a piece from 2018 in the Paris Review by Annie Debiel. And this sort of captures that although he didn't write anything, she makes the case that his life post the glory years weren't empty. Hammett didn't publish anything in the 26 years between The Thin Man and his death, but he wasn't idle. He drank prodigiously. He edited his lover Lillian Hellman's plays. He joined the Communist Party. He taught a mystery writing class. He joined the army again. He stopped drinking. He was called to testify before the House of Un-American Activities Committee. He was found guilty of contempt of court and sent to prison. He maintained relationships with Josephine and his daughters, and with Lillian, who became more of a friend than a lover. He had other lovers. He adored his grandchildren. He fished. He made his own fishing lures. He took up sketching and photography. He read. There is tragedy in his not writing, only in that he tried. He struggled for decades to finish a novel, Tulip, and never did.
It was published, wasn't it, eventually, Tulip, the unfinished novel?
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah, it was. The other thing to say, so for anybody listening to this who's never read any Hammett, much as we've been talking about the Maltese Falcon,
Red Harvest,
the other books, I mean, Red Harvest is just astonishing, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the biggest crime writing award that's awarded annually in Scandinavia, where they do take their literary, is called The Glass Key, which is another fabulous Hammett novel.
Well, look, I know everyone is on tenterhooks for our quiz.
I certainly am.
Okay, so what we're going to do is, experts have identified, as I said, 20 songs by Elvis Costello. 20. 20 songs by Elvis Costello. And the reason why this is so interesting is, of course, our guest, Mark Billingham, is, I happen to know, a huge fan of Elvis Costello. I happen to know John Mitchinson is a huge fan of Elvis Costello. I myself am a huge fan of Elvis Costello. Nicky Birch is not a huge fan of Elvis Costello. So that's going to be very interesting. And also, I'd like to say, occasionally Backlisted is criticised for being a bit blokey. And I always reject that criticism passionately. It really annoys me and gets under my skin. Well, that's not the case for the next 5 minutes. So the great things about podcasts is if this is too much, just fast forward it. Just fast forward it 5 minutes. We're going to have this little bit of fun now. So, Nicky, are you ready?
I've got to say, Andy, this is so niche. I mean, I actually did Elvis Costello as my specialist subject on Celebrity Mastermind, and the connection with Dashiell Hammett never came up.
I love it.
I know, right?
There's a great connection with Joe Strummer, though. Did you know about the Joe Strummer connection? When Strummer was ill, very seriously ill in hospital with TB, I think, at one point. The book he chose to read was The Maltese Falcon. I've always thought.
I did
Joe
not know that.
cool.
Okay, that's very good.
Just before you start, and I reveal my kind of, amazing knowledge of Elvis Costello songs or not, I also have to say that I've only watched the film as well. So this puts me in a really, and that was a while ago.
Okay.
So
Nicky,
anything I get, I'm going to be impressed with myself.
Nicky, everything to
remember,
play
guess, Nicky.
Right.
Everything to
I'm
play
here
for,
for you.
right? So the way we're going to run this quiz, such as it's going to fall to pieces fast. Don't worry. Is I'm going to ask Nicky, then John, then our guest Mark, to name one of the 20 songs of Elvis Costello inspired by Dashiell Hammett's novel, The Maltese Falcon. Admittedly, as Mark said earlier, are these loosely inspired by? Very loose, Mark.
Okay.
Very, very loosely indeed.
Okay.
So, Nicky, to you, a song by Elvis Costello, which is inspired by The Maltese Falcon, please.
Okay. I know 3 Elvis Costello songs. So I'm
Okay,
going to go with Watching the Detectives.
You are right.
I think you're on
Okay.
safe ground there.
Great.
John.
Trust.
It's not a song,
No.
it's an album.
Yeah, exactly. Expelled. He's out. Nicky did better than you, Mitch. Well done. Right, it's between Nicky and Mark Billingham. Right, Mark, go.
Okay, well, I'm going to go very loosely with Battered Old Bird.
Yes! Battered Old Bird, The Maltese Falcon, magnificent. Nicky, back to you.
The other song I know is Alison, but I don't know if there's an Alison in Maltese Falcon.
What's your third Elvis Costello song?
Oliver's Army.
Yes.
It's not one of those
It's
either.
not. I mean, I'd love to find some way in which it,
Yeah.
by default, Mark
Yeah.
is going to win
Yeah.
this. But
Okay.
I know he can come up with
Am I
another
out
go.
Well,
completely
I don't know,
now?
it may not be on your list. It
I'll
may
give-
Yeah, you're out.
You're
Mitch,
out, you're
Mitch,
done.
You trust. You're out. You're
Well,
done.
so I can't even say
Um,
man out of time. I mean,
No,
No,
that wasn't on this
Because there
experts
are-
list anyway.
because there are at least two in the Maltese Falcon. I'm going to go with The Imposter.
Yes, you are correct that we have that on our list. Okay, Mark Billingham wins our quiz, which is only right, as it should be. John, Nicky, Mark, are there any others you would like to just throw into the ring?
I want to know what's on your list.
yeah, come
Tell
on.
me the album. Tell me the album, and let's see if we can guess the tracks.
Punch the Clock, there's a track from Punch the Clock.
King of Thieves.
Correct. Third track, side one, I think Armed Forces.
Third
Green
track,
shirt.
side one, Armed
Just
Forces.
throwing that in there.
No, that is the third track side. But I think I've got this wrong. It's Goon Squad.
Goon
isn't it?
Squad,
yeah. Goon Squad.
Goons, right.
Yeah,
I'll just give you the rest. I Stand
Oh, yeah.
Accused.
yeah,
Possession.
yeah.
The Beat.
Yeah.
Shot with His Own Gun.
Boy with a problem.
Worthless thing.
Boy with a
Boy with a
problem.
problem. Written by Chris Difford, if I'm right.
Elisha Cook Jr.
Yeah.
Elisha Cook Jr. is a boy with a problem, right? Okay, yeah. Worthless thing.
Good.
Yeah.
Crimes of Paris, because it's plaster of Paris, so that's the bird, isn't it?
It's made of lead, Andy.
Heathen Town.
The bird's made of lead.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, experts are full. We've had enough of experts. This offer is
Very
unrepeatable.
Okay.
Kinda Murder, my all-time doll, American Gangster Time, Complicated Shadows, Alibi, and of course, Spooky Girlfriend.
Yeah.
So okay. So if you've just fast forwarded this segment, we're back. We're back. The show is now open to everyone again.
We're back.
Welcome back. So
I'd love to think he's a fan. I would love to think that Elvis is a
come
fan.
on! I reckon. Come on, Mark.
Surely.
Elvis is all kidding aside.
She's filing her nails while they're dragging the lake.
Elvis's songs are full of references to crime tropes
and film noir.
Fiction novelists. Yeah. I always wanted to ask you, do you think you were ever inspired yourself by, because I know how much you love Elvis, do you think that little bit of that snuck into the way you see the world and think about things?
The thing in all seriousness has always attracted me to Costello are the lyrics. I mean, he's an amazing songwriter, but the sort of the stories that are not obvious. It's just Kinda Murder, which is a song you just mentioned, is absolutely that. You listen to the lyrics of that song and you go, what the hell is going on? And you think you've got a handle on it, and you start, Oddly, there is a collection of short stories being published next year called Brutal and Strange, short stories based on the songs of Elvis Costello, and it's coming out next year. And I've written a song based on I've written a story based on the song Our Little Angel. Again, nothing to do with the song, just what that song made me think.
Right.
And he does that better than anybody.
And to think people would level criticism that this bit was irrelevant.
Irrelevant or blokey. It's ridiculous.
It was so tied into the heart of the show. I can't believe it. Well, anyway, Johnny.
And I'm afraid it's time now for us to climb into the battered, backlisted jalopy and leave Dashiell Hammett and Sam Spade on the street corner. Huge thanks to Mark for guiding us through the mean streets of this wonderful novel, and to Nikki Birch for helping us sound like the wise-cracking wiseacres we aspire to be.
If you would like show notes with clips, links, and suggestions for further reading for this show, and the 187 that we've always and the 187 that we've already recorded, please visit our website at thatlisted.fm. If you want to buy the books discussed, visit our shop at bookshop.org and choose Backlisted as your bookshop. And we're still keen to hear from you on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram.
If you want to hear Backlisted without ads, subscribe to our Patreon, www.patreon.com/backlisted. Your subscription brings other benefits. If you subscribe at the Lock Listener level for less than the price of a plate of pickled pig's feet at John's Grill, you'll get 2 extra exclusive podcasts every month. We call it Lock Listed because it began in the Wenlock Tavern just before lockdown, and it features the 3 of us talking and recommending the books, films, and music we've enjoyed in the previous fortnight. People who subscribe at this level also get their names read out, accompanied by lashings of thanks and gratitude like this. Rob Annadale, thank you. Tessa Kulik, thanks, Tessa. Gillian Roach, thank you, Gillian. Jennifer Langley, thank you, Jennifer. And Sue Mendis, thank you.
Alice Lancaster, Monica Rookholt,
thank you.
Nicola Peck,
thank you.
Gretchen Rubin,
thank you.
Keep it sincere, Johnny, come on. And Jesus.
We are sincere, we love you. Thank you.
And Duncan, thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
You need a little cheesy theme behind that. So it's like our song, Simon Bates, our tune.
Yeah.
I know. Do you know what? Do you know what, Nikki? Do you know what, Nikki? Mark's right. Could we have some easy listening Elvis Costello the next time we do this?
Yes, that would be great. Just so we can snap along in the background.
Nice. And we're delighted to add a new name to the highest firmament of all. The Guild of Master Storytellers welcomes Stephen Van Amel.
Stephen,
thank you, Stephen.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Well, Mark, before we go, this has been a lot of fun. It's been a hoot. I would go so far as to say. What is the? Is there anything that you feel we haven't said? I mean, there's lots, isn't there, about Hammett or Sam Spade or the Maltese Falcon?
Sam Spade, we've mentioned it more than once, but I think it's absolutely astonishing that this iconic detective was in one book and one book only. I mean, that to me is just a mark of how important and great this book is. And I'm absolutely thrilled by the fact that you, Andy, who hadn't read it, loved it, and that John, who read it again, loved it even more. You know, it would have been fairly awful if you'd both gone, well, nah, it's not all that, is it? That would be quite a strange episode of Backlisted. Although maybe you've had those, I don't know, where people have chosen books that you all hated.
Almost never. One famous example.
Well, you can tell me when we finish recording.
I've just got one little thing. Can I just read one little thing, which I thought was lovely? Diana Johnson, the novelist, said this lovely thing. The heroism of his life lay not in his Horatio Alger success, but in the long years after success, when money and gifts were gone. It is the long, blank years that prove the spirit. Which I thought was
that's beautiful. Yeah,
kind of cool thing.
Okay, well, listen, thanks, everybody. And thank you, Mark, for coming on. This has been great.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me. It's been a pleasure.
Amazing.
See you next time, everybody. See you next time. Bye.
See you in a fortnight.